Hi guys, it's Blackie, and today in the Ground Pounder series I'm going to bring out a piece of gear that I recently found. That I was digging through some of my storage boxes from way back and found some of my original camping gear from the 1970s. So this piece of gear, you've seen something like it before, but maybe you don't appreciate what you're looking at. And if you ever find one of these in good shape, you're probably going to want to pick it up. So let me set my pack down and I'll show you. Okay. Inside an old storage box of mine, I found this. Now what this is a Vietnam and probably Korean era vinyl U.S. Army poncho. These things are bulletproof. Now these things are much heavier than our modern one, or the ones we think of that came out of the 80s, 90s, which was a sil nylon. This was a type of vinyl. Now this is the reason that whenever you talk to guys that were served back in them days and they said, I didn't wear a poncho because it didn't work. What they meant was it trapped heat. So if you put this on in hot, humid, tropical jungle like Vietnam and you're trying to walk with it raining, you're just as wet underneath it as you are outside of it because of sweat. So a lot of guys just opted not to do it. Some did because there was a way of carrying it to use it later as a shelter. When you're trying to sleep, put it over your head, see. But these things are just bulletproof. Now I've added in my modern ridgeline and stakes for the demonstration day. Now I'm going to show you two different ways I set this up back in the day and why I set it up that way. So let me get my ridgeline slung up and I'll show you. Okay. Great big vinyl ponchos, just like our regular poncho that we had later on. The only problem with them was often this rubberized coating right around the neck flaked off and gave up the ghost, went to cracking and splitting and allowed the thing to leak. So that was the weakness of it. See, all the seams have been sealed with that stuff. This one I had back then I took really good care of, and I found this stuff years ago at a tarpaulin company that was in town, that it was a spray-on reconditioner for vinyl that they would take in, you know, like vinyl billboards, stuff like that, something you put up once a year, you know, like for the big college football weekend or whatever. They would recommend these cans of spray. It looked like a can of spray paint. And so for years I would treat this every 6 months with that stuff because it was cheap enough. Sadly that company is long gone. I have no idea where to find anything like that, but it has really helped and kept mine working. So if you know, any of you guys know of anything like that, let me know. Okay, I've got my ridge line up. Now I'm going to set up for the classic lean-to sideways. And so I've got 3 Prusik knots with toggles on my line, and I have 3 grommets. So, I'm going to start, pull the toggle up, take that loop of cord, go through the grommet, then I'm going to come over the top and simply button that toggle through. So that's one. Go to the next one. Same thing. Okay, you take the toggle, you slide the toggle up, that leaves you with a loop. You take the loop, you go through the grommet, just like that, open the loop back up, and take the toggle and button it through it, just like, scoot up, just like that. That's all you gotta do. Now slide it till it's tight. Okay, that will pull it tight between these two. Now go to this end, pull the crucifix, set it tight between those two. Now I'll take my stakes and stake out the back. Okay, there is the hood tied off to a long line that goes up to that tree in order to pull the center out and give me more head space. Okay, now since the ground is wet, I'm going to reach into my nighthawk and pull out my sitting pad so I don't have to sit in wet leaves. Okay, as you can see, there is plenty of headroom in here. Now this is the way that I would get into it whenever I was wanting to sleep lengthways. So I'd have my head uphill, I would have a fire straight out in front of me, and there would be plenty of room in here for me and my gear to be out of the rain. Of course, it goes without saying that you would face the back end of this toward any prevailing rain. Now down here in my south, it was south east to southwest, somewhere in the southern region, because it's going to be rain coming off the Gulf. Unless we had a storm front coming in which case I wanted to face it toward the west-northwest, because that was that rain coming in that way. But you normally have plenty of warning, and so you can set this up fairly easy. Nice big. Now, I have, God, how many times have I camped underneath this thing? I kept it protected. This was my tarp. This was my whole shelter system right here. I never rolled up in it and rolled around on the ground and got holes in it or anything like that. I learned from old vets who told me about how, yeah, you could wrap up in it and lay down and go to sleep, but you ended up with holes fairly quickly. But they're going to be able to trade it in next time they're in the base and get a quartermaster, see? So we didn't care if it got a few holes in it. We just slapped tape on it and keep going. I wanted to keep mine in good shape, and so to me it was a tarp that I could also wear as a poncho, and I treated it like that. I brought other material that I could sacrifice to turn into a ground cloth back in those days, and one of them was a Vietnam poncho that was the early ones, that was the nylon outer shell and a sprayed on inside rubber coating. Those never lasted any length of time. They always cracked. So you'd find them in surplus dirt cheap because they weren't any good anymore for a poncho or a shelter, because you hang it up and water just poured through every crack. But for a ground cloth, to be able to lay down on the wet ground or whatever, it was fine for that. And so I carried one. They wadded up small because there was hardly anything left on it. It was basically a semi-waterproof sheet at that point. And I would put it underneath here as my ground layer. But there's another way I would set this up. Now this way, as you're seeing now, would be for rain or winter or sleeping lengthways. But I would sometimes set this up in a different configuration because I wanted more room to work on a project, let's say, and I'm using it more as a sunshade or just a light drizzle. Let me set that up and I'll show you. Okay guys, here it is set up in the long way. Instead of wide, I've set it up long, as in deep. Now it still has, this old poncho, they had grommets, 3 on each side. I think the modern ones do not. They have less grommets, probably a cost saver. But you see how tall that makes, and I'll get in there in just a second. But you see, you pull it back and stake it, and you pull the top out, and again I pulled it up to that tree. Just like that, and this makes a very tall shelter, more head space. Now you can still sleep in there. There's enough room to lengthways lay in there and sleep, but you don't have the width. You don't have quite as much rain protection, but you do have sun protection and stuff like that. By doing it this way, I can get deeper up under the shelter, like this, much further underneath, and I got headroom under here. This was great on one of those days when it's drizzling or something like that, where it's not so much of a heavy downpour, but it's just that constant little wet and etc. And I want to work on something right here. I'm working on a project. Maybe I'm trying to dry out and get me something to get a fire going. By setting it up in this configuration like this, it gives me more depth front to back. Now, yeah, like I said, I could lay down, put my head back here, my feet to a fire, or I could just diagonally lay in a fetal position and still be covered. This is also good in the winter for catching heat, where I'm wanting a small fire to warm me and I'm not spending the night. I'm just wanting to sit down again, maybe cook a meal or whatever, get out of the wind, get out of the drizzle, and get a little bit of heat. This will capture and hold more heat around me, and it's better in the winter as a warming area, as a work area, etc. So long ways gives you more depth, but less side-to-side coverage. See, if I stick my hands out, they're outside. Sideways gives me more length, and I can therefore lay more comfortably up under it, but I have shallower depth. Sometimes depth was more important than the width this way. So that's the reason I use this configuration from time to time. This poncho and me go back 50 years. And it still is viable today. There is one or two little small pinholes in it, just from sheer time that I could repair. But out of remembering those old camps and nostalgia, I put this up. I retired this probably 20 years ago and went to other, more lighter, easier to carry tarps. I was still doing backpacking in those days. And so this was, when I was a kid and a teenager, this was my tarp. This was my sole shelter system, was this and some sort of ground thing. Sometimes that was a dog food bag or whatever, just something to get me up out of the dirt. And then I would make leaf piles and stuff like that and cover them with the ground thing to make leaf ticks and stuff like that to sleep on the ground back in them days. Me and this tarp probably have gone 200, 300, 400 miles over the years, easily. I mean, canoeing. This would be slung off of the upturned canoe at night for shelter to sleep on the sandbar. Also as rain gear, and just like Vietnam, it sucks in Alabama when it's like it is right now, 90% humidity, and it's about 92, 93 with heat index right now, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning. So this, you know, if you're trying to wear it for rain gear, you're going to sweat. And I can see where the troopers in Vietnam and Korea talked about that. They were dead right. But as a bulletproof shelter, this thing stood up to hailstorms with me before. Sadly, these are not made anymore, and probably wouldn't be a market for it because they are so heavy and they are so hot. Our modern stuff is much better and lighter. I'll give them that. But for longevity, this served in the military before it was ever donated to me as a kid. And here I am in my 60s and I still got it. A lot of the new stuff can't say that for longevity. Hope you've enjoyed this, guys. If you have, hit that like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. And there will be more ground pounder videos coming up in the future. Till next time, guys, I'm Black, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.